She's financially clueless, he laughed, louder than the guests at his own birthday. I stood there holding a beer I suddenly couldn't swallow while my father turned my career into a punchline in front of 50 people. Then he dragged up my failed startup, my single status, said I'd burned through savings playing on the computer. Laughter. Silence. My mom fixed the dessert tray. No one said a word. But they didn't know what I knew, that his house, the same one he used to humiliate me, was 3 months from foreclosure, and I had the cash to buy it. I didn't argue. I vanished. Then I made one call. I wasn't just going to prove him wrong, I was going to own the proof. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Dana Kellerman, and I'm 40 years old. I live alone in a modest rental in Oakwood Heights, where I run my 6-figure consulting business from a sun-filled home office. My father, Richard Kellerman, still introduces my career as Dana's little internet thing at family gatherings, his weathered face creasing with that familiar dismissive smile. The constant undermining stings, but I've learned to nod and change the subject. What Dad doesn't know is that while he's been questioning my choices, I've quietly built an investment portfolio worth more than his house. My fingertips brush the edge of my laptop, where the latest account statement shows numbers that would shock him silent. Sometimes the strongest position is the one nobody sees coming. But let me start from the beginning. The day of Dad's 65th birthday dawned bright and muggy classic August in the suburbs. I arrived early to help Mom set up, hauling potato salad and paper plates across their perfectly manicured lawn. The same lawn where I'd once built crooked lemonade stands, back when Dad still called me his little entrepreneur. The party swelled by mid-afternoon. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and neighbors filled the backyard with that particular chaos only family gatherings create. Kids chased each other through sprinklers while the adults clustered around the grill, where Dad held court in his kiss the cook apron, spatula raised like a scepter. "Dana!" My cousin Rachel waved me over to the drinks cooler. "How's the big city consultant doing?" I grabbed a beer, condensation cool against my palm. "Can't complain, just wrapped a major project last week." "Still working from home?" Uncle Pete joined us, cracking open his third Bud Light. "When are you gonna get a real office?" "The virtual setup works well for my clients," I said, keeping my tone light. "Plus, rent's cheaper this way." "Speaking of real estate," Rachel chimed in, "have you thought about buying? The market in your area is supposed to be hot right now." Before I could answer, Dad's laugh boomed across the yard. He'd abandoned his post at the grill and was suddenly right there, inserting himself into our circle. "Buy a house? Dana?" He shook his head, silver hair catching the afternoon sun. "She's financially clueless. Still renting at 40 guests, I didn't raise her right." The words landed like ice water down my spine. A ripple of awkward chuckles spread through the group. I forced my lips into a smile, though my chest tightened. But Dad wasn't done. He took a long pull from his beer, warming to his audience. "Remember that startup she tried? What was it in years ago? Some kind of online shopping thing?" He turned to the gathered faces, now including my Aunt Susan and 2 of my younger cousins. Burned through her savings in 6 months, had to move back home. My fingers clenched around my bottle. That failed startup had taught me everything I needed to know about building my current business. But Dad steamrolled on. "Now she's got this cute little blog or whatever." "It's a consulting firm," I corrected quietly. "We handle digital strategy for..." Right. He waved his hand dismissively. "Playing on the computer all day. You know what real work is? Try running an HVAC company for 30 years. Try supporting a family." More nervous laughter. Someone muttered, "Classic Richard." I searched the crowd for Mom, found her hovering by the dessert table, eyes fixed on arranging cookies she'd already arranged twice. Course, if she'd settled down like her sister. Dad gestured toward my younger sister Amy's picture on the patio wall, smiling with her husband and kids in matching Christmas sweaters. "But I guess some people just don't prioritize family." The heat crawled up my neck. Each word stripped away another layer of composure I'd built over years of his teasing. This wasn't good-natured ribbing. This was character assassination, served with beer and burgers. "Excuse me," I managed. "Need to use the bathroom." I didn't run through the sliding glass doors into the blessed cool of the house, down the familiar hallway to the guest room where I'd be sleeping tonight. The door clicked shut behind me, and finally, I let my hands shake. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the faded wallpaper I'd helped Mom pick out 15 years ago. The pattern blurred as hot tears threatened, but I blinked them back. No, he didn't get to have my tears anymore. The sun set. Voices and laughter drifted up from the yard. I stayed in that room, laptop open on my knees, listening to the party wind down. When the house finally quieted and darkness pressed against the windows, I opened a new document. My fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, I typed a single word: deed. I pulled out of the driveway at dawn, leaving only a brief had-to-head-home-early note on the kitchen counter. The steering wheel felt solid under my white-knuckled grip as suburban streets gave way to highway lanes. Every mile marker ticked past like a metronome counting Richard's jabs from yesterday. Financially clueless. The words echoed in time with the road stripes. My jaw ached from clenching. Still renting at 40. The morning sun glared through my windshield, and I fumbled for my sunglasses, nearly missing my exit. 20 minutes later, I sat in my apartment's parking lot, engine off but keys still in the ignition. The quiet felt heavy after 3 hours of replaying that conversation. Inside, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county assessor's website. I'd looked up the family house before, usually when Dad bragged about its rising value. But this time, I dug deeper. Property records, tax history, liens anything public. Something caught my eye. 2 refinances in the past 8 years. That was odd. Mom and Dad had paid off the original mortgage when I was in college. Why take out new loans on a free and clear house? I subscribed to a premium property data service, the kind real estate investors use. My credit card didn't flinch at the $200 monthly fee. The first report made my eyebrows rise. Dad had pulled out nearly 80% of the home's equity. The second report made them shoot higher. He'd done it again 3 years later. Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. Public records became a maze of breadcrumbs. I cross-referenced dates, amounts, filing numbers. Each new document felt like another piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. My consulting work sat untouched while I followed the money trail. Then I found it. The mortgage was 3 months delinquent. A notice of default had been filed last week. But that wasn't all. There was a lien from Fast Cash Loans, one of those predatory places with neon signs and triple-digit interest rates. I sat back in my chair, oddly calm. The man who'd publicly ridiculed my financial choices was drowning in debt he'd hidden from everyone. The great provider, the successful businessman, the patriarch who measured worth in property and status was barely keeping his head above water. A strange relief washed over me, followed by something darker. This wasn't just ammunition, this was an opportunity. But I needed help, someone who understood the mechanics of mortgage debt, someone who could see angles I might miss. My eyes drifted to the framed photo on my bookshelf. Uncle Marcus's retirement party, 5 years before cancer took him. He stood next to his best friend and longtime accountant, Eli Navarro. They'd worked together for decades, auditing corporate books, spotting financial sleight of hand. After Marcus died, Eli had quietly offered his help if I ever needed it. I hadn't called him since the funeral, but I knew he still lived in that same brick ranch house, still had the same landline he'd refused to give up. My fingers moved before doubt could stop them, dialing the number from memory. 3 rings, 4, then a familiar, measured voice. Navarro residence. Eli? It's Dana Kellerman, Marcus's niece. A pause. Then warmth filled his tone. Dana, it's been too long. How are you? I traced the edge of my laptop, where the damning documents still glowed on screen. I need your expertise. And your discretion. Do you still drink that awful green tea? He chuckled. Every morning, 9 a.m. tomorrow, I'll bring the tea. After hanging up, I stared at the phone in my hand. Tomorrow, I'd show Eli what I'd found. Tomorrow, we'd start building something precise and undeniable. But tonight, one thought kept circling. Dad had spent years questioning my financial judgment while secretly mortgaging away his stability. The irony should have made me laugh. Instead, it crystallized something inside me hard and sharp and perfect. I let the phone ring twice before hitting the green button. My finger hovered over Eli's name in my contacts, a number I hadn't dialed since Uncle Jack's funeral 3 years ago. Dana? Eli's voice carried that same steady calm I remembered. What a surprise! Hi, Eli. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. My throat felt dry. I need some professional advice. Professional, eh? A soft chuckle. I'm retired, but I'm listening. I took a deep breath and started with the BBQ. As I described Richard's performance, Eli's breathing changed subtle huffs of displeasure. When I got to the refinancing discovery, he cut in with sharp questions about dates and amounts. Classic auditor mode. 3 months behind, you said? Papers rustled on his end. And 2 cash-out refinances in 8 years? Yes, the latest statement shows. I pulled up the PDF. Just over $300,000 still owed. Jack always said Richard lived beyond his means. Eli's chair creaked. But this? This is something else. What are you thinking of doing? I laid out my idea. Buy the mortgage before foreclosure. Use an LLC to stay anonymous. Make Richard face reality on my terms. With each detail, Eli's grew more interested. It's possible, he said finally, but we'd need to move fast. Banks don't sit on non-performing loans these days. We? You think I'm letting you navigate this alone? Another chair creak. Jack would haunt me. Besides, a pause. I've seen too many people like Richard skate by on bluster. Sometimes they need a wake-up call. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Thank you, Eli. Don't thank me yet. First, we need a Delaware LLC best privacy laws. Then we approach the bank as potential investors. I still have contacts who can help us look legitimate. We spent the next hour plotting details. Eli's experience made everything clearer: how to structure the purchase, what documents we'd need, which questions to ask. By the time we hung up, I had 3 pages of notes and a growing sense of possibility. 2 days later, we had our first call with the bank. Eli handled most of the talking, all professional courtesy and careful questions. I stayed quiet, watching numbers scroll past on my screen as the loan officer shared details. The note's available for purchase, the officer confirmed, but we're moving it to auction in 6 weeks if it's not sold. We have other interested parties. I felt my pulse quicken. 6 weeks. The timeline made it real. We'll need complete documentation, Eli replied smoothly. Payment history, current valuation. Of course, I'll email everything within the hour. After we disconnected, I sat back in my chair. The sun had set while we talked, leaving my office dim except for the blue glow of my monitors. 6 weeks to gather funds, complete paperwork, and buy my father's debt. The amount wasn't the Ishimi investment account could cover it easily, but something else nagged at me. Having second thoughts? Eli's voice was gentle through the speaker. Just one. I touched the screen where the loan numbers glowed. This isn't just revenge anymore. It's a business decision, he finished, one with personal stakes. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I was back at that BBQ, watching Richard hold court, hearing the laughter, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as he dismissed my entire life's work. My eyes opened. Eli? Yes? Let's buy my father's house. There's my girl. I could hear his smile. I'll start the LLC paperwork tonight. Chapter 5. Chapter Content. Chapter 4, Scene 2. I wired the money on a Tuesday morning, $350,000, gone with a single click. My hands shook as I typed in the confirmation code. Years of careful saving, channeled into one perfect moment. You know that feeling when you're all in on a bet? This wasn't gambling, this was certainty. The funds have cleared, Eli confirmed later that afternoon. His voice carried a hint of admiration. I have to say, Dana, I'm impressed. Most people talk about revenge. You funded it. I smiled despite my nerves. Let's just hope the paperwork goes smoothly. Remember how I said that? Pure jinx. The first week crawled by in a blur of DocuSign requests and notary appointments. Eli handled most of the bank negotiations, thank God for his contacts, while I focused on establishing our LLC. Delaware paperwork, tax ID numbers, the works. Every night, I'd check my email a dozen times, waiting for problems. Then it happened. What do you mean, flagged for review? I gripped my phone tighter, pacing my living room. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my carpet, the same carpet I'd been wearing thin with worry. One of the deed transfer documents, Eli explained, the bank's legal department found some discrepancy in the chain of title from the last refinance. They're requesting additional verification. My stomach dropped. How long? A week, maybe more. But that puts us dangerously close to the 6-week deadline, I know. I sank onto my couch, remembering all those times Richard had dismissed my business acumen. What if this fell apart? What if all this planning, all this money, led nowhere? The thought of him never knowing how close he came to losing everything, it made my teeth ache. We'll fix this, Eli assured me. I've got calls in to some old colleagues. If anyone can expedite the review process, they can. For the next 8 days, sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard at that BBQ, his laugh cutting through me like broken glass. I'd check my phone at 3 a.m., willing new emails to appear. The bank's deadline loomed closer, a ticking clock counting down my shot at justice. Eli worked his magic through back channels. His former audit partners, now scattered across various financial institutions, pulled whatever strings they could reach. We submitted additional documentation, clarifying affidavits, anything to keep the deal alive. Finally, on day 9, we got the news. The legal department had cleared the revised paperwork. Our closing date would hold by exactly 2 days. It's tight, Eli admitted during our final review call, but it's doable. We close tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've triple-checked every document. I let out a breath I'd been holding for what felt like weeks. Thank you, Eli. I mean it. Without you. Save it for after we close, he cut in gently. Nothing's certain until those papers are signed. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The sun had set, and I was sitting in my darkened home office, staring at the final transfer instructions. One more night, one more sleep, then Richard would learn what his financially clueless daughter had accomplished. My phone buzzed, lighting up the room. I glanced down, expecting Eli with last-minute details. Instead, I saw a name that made my blood run cold, Richard Kellerman. For a moment, I just stared at it, watching it vibrate across my desk like some kind of omen. We hadn't spoken since the BBQ. Why now? Why tonight? You ever have one of those moments where time seems to stop? Where you can feel fate holding its breath? That's what it felt like, watching my father's name flash across my screen, knowing that in less than 24 hours, I'd own his house. My phone lit up just after 9 that night. Richard's name flashed on the screen, and my pulse jumped. I let it go to voicemail, gripping the edge of my kitchen counter. The message notification blinked. I took a deep breath and pressed play. His voice filled my quiet kitchen, that familiar growl tinged with something I hadn't heard before fear. Dana, call me back right now. The bank called today about some outfit trying to buy my mortgage. Said they're reviewing the paperwork. Sounds like a scam to me. I need to know if you've heard anything about this. These vultures are probably targeting the whole neighborhood. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. The granite countertop felt cool against my palms, the same sleek stone I'd chosen because it reminded me of success, of stability. Now it anchored me as my mind raced. How much did he know? Had someone at the bank leaked our names? Remember those moments when you're so close to winning that losing becomes unthinkable? That's where I was standing. I didn't sleep that night. Every car that passed my window could have been him coming to confront me. But morning came, and with it, a text from Eli. Bank manager called. Your father's on his way there. Says he's going to expose the fraud. My hands were steady as I grabbed my keys. I knew Richard's routine. He'd take the main road, park in the front lot, stride in like he owned the place. So I circled around back, choosing a spot with a clear view of both entrances. The late morning sun beat down on my windshield as I waited. Right on schedule, his truck pulled in. You should have seen him march toward those glass doors, chest puffed out like he was about to save the day. The same walk he'd had at the BBQ when he'd torn me down in front of everyone. I checked my watch. 3 minutes passed. 5, 10. Then I saw the bank manager, Mrs. Chen, who'd handled my paperwork gesture Richard into her office. Even through the tinted windows, I could read his body language, the confident shoulders, the authoritative lean forward. Classic Richard Kellerman about to set someone straight. Mrs. Chen calmly opened a folder. I knew what was inside the ownership transfer documents with my name printed in clear, legal type. I'd signed them yesterday. Remember that saying about pride coming before a fall? In Richard's case, it was more like a collapse. I watched his posture change. First, the shoulders dropped, then his head jerked back like he'd been slapped. He snatched the papers, holding them closer, probably searching for some mistake, some proof this was all a bad joke. Mrs. Chen kept talking, pointing to different sections of the documents. Each gesture seemed to deflate him further. His hand came up to his face, that gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was processing bad news. 20 minutes later, the office door opened. Richard stepped out, but this wasn't the man who'd walked in. His face had gone stark white, his lips pressed into a bloodless line. The papers were crushed in his fist. He pushed through the front doors, squinting in the sunlight. For a moment, he just stood there, like a man lost in his own neighborhood. Then his head turned, scanning the parking lot, and his eyes locked directly on my car. My heart slammed against my ribs. There was no mistaking, I knew I was there. And now he was walking toward me, each step heavy with the weight of realization. You know those moments when your past and future collide? When everything you've planned for crashes into everything you've run from? That's where I sat, watching my father close the distance between us, holding proof that his financially clueless daughter now owned every brick of his pride. He was 10 steps away. 8. 5. I didn't start the engine. I didn't lock the doors. I just waited, watching him approach through my windshield, his shadow growing longer across my hood. Through the bank's windows, I watched Mrs. Chen slide a document across her desk. Richard's face changed like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the color. His head snapped up, turning toward the parking lot. I didn't need to read lips to know he'd just seen my name. The bank's glass doors burst open. Richard stormed out, his work boots hitting the pavement with familiar heavy steps, the same stride that used to shake our old kitchen floor when he came home angry. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he made a beeline for my car. He rapped hard on my window. "Get out here, now." I took my time, making sure my hands weren't shaking before I opened the door. The summer heat hit me like a wall as I stepped onto the asphalt. "What the hell is this?" He thrust the bank papers at me, his face flushed red above his gray beard. "You went behind my back? Your own father?" A minivan pulled into a nearby spot. A young mom hustled 2 kids toward the bank, giving us a wide berth. I kept my voice low and steady. "Let's talk about going behind backs, Dad. 3 months of missed payments? 2 refinances you never mentioned to Mom?" His jaw clenched. "That's none of your business. I had it under control." "Really?" "Because the bank was about to foreclose. In 6 weeks, you'd have lost everything." "So this is what? Your big moment to play hero?" He crumpled the edge of the papers. "Or just payback for some hurt feelings." The BBQ flashed through my mind, his laugh, the smirks, the shame burning in my chest. But I pushed it away. This wasn't about feelings anymore. "This is business, Dad, pure and simple. You've got 2 options now." I squared my shoulders, meeting his glare. Option 1, sign over the deed and move out by the end of the month. Clean break. He scoffed. "And option 2? Stay as my tenant. Market rate rent, starting next month. First and last month's deposit required." Richard's face went through a series of micro-expressions: disbelief, rage, then something close to panic. The papers trembled in his grip. "You can't do this to me, to your mother. We raised you in that house. And now I own it." The words came out clearer than I'd imagined. "Legally, officially, with cash not loans I can't pay back." He stepped closer, using his height like he always had. "You think this makes you smart, important? All it proves is you're willing to stab family in the back." Funny, that's not how I remember it at the BBQ, when you were so eager to tell everyone how financially clueless I am. I pulled out my own copy of the ownership papers. Guess I learned something after all. Richard's face darkened. Without another word, he spun around and stalked to his truck. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as he peeled out of the parking lot. I stood there until his truck disappeared, letting the summer breeze cool my flushed cheeks. A text buzzed in my pocket, Eli checking in. I'd tell him about it later. Over the next week, the family grapevine lit up. Richard's version spread first about scammers and betrayal, about ungrateful daughters. But numbers don't lie, and neither did the bank records. Whispers started. Questions arose. Why had he refinanced? Where did the money go? 7 days after our parking lot showdown, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Is it true? I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Before I could reply, another message came through. Moving truck just pulled up. I drove past the house that evening. Sure enough, a large white van sat in the driveway, its rear doors open wide. Through the growing dusk, I could see shadows moving inside, carrying out pieces of my childhood home. The brass porch light the one Dad installed when I was 12 cast, a warm glow over the scene. He'd made his choice. I'll help adjust this to first-person POV, since the genre rules specify first-person, pass start to finish, as a hard rule. Here's the continuation. The moving van came and went without a word. Richard worked in silence, carrying out boxes while I watched from my car across the street. Ever the proud man, he refused help from anyone, even Mom. The neighbors pretended not to notice, but I caught Mrs. Peterson peeking through her curtains next door. You know that feeling when you're waiting for something big to happen and then it just fizzles? That's how it felt watching him drive away. No dramatic showdown, no final words. Just the quiet sound of truck tires on asphalt and the clink of his house keys landing in my mailbox. 2 weeks later, I stood in the empty living room where he'd held court for decades. Dust motes danced in the afternoon, light streaming through windows that needed washing. The air felt stale, heavy with the ghosts of old arguments and forced family dinners. Remember how I said respect is earned in silence? Well, silence had won. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter where he used to lecture me about real jobs and settling down. The surface was gritty with neglect. A forgotten coffee mug still sat in the sink, rings of brown staining the ceramic, probably from his last morning here. In the corner, there was a scuff mark from when he'd kicked his boots off every night, claiming his territory one thud at a time. How's that territory working out now, Dad? I whispered to the empty room. Upstairs, the master bedroom still held the impression of his presence. A few wire hangers rattled lonely in the closet. The mirror, where he'd adjusted his collar before every family gathering, reflected my smile now. I remembered standing in this doorway as a kid, watching him get ready for work, thinking he was larger than life. Life has a way of adjusting those perspectives, doesn't it? My phone buzzed the property manager confirming our meeting tomorrow. I'd already decided to rent the place out. Not for the money, I didn't need it. But an empty house tells no stories. A lived-in home? That writes new chapters. Word spread through the family grapevine that Richard had downsized to a trailer park in Chester County. 3 towns over, far enough to dodge Sunday dinners without technically cutting ties. Mom tried to maintain the fiction, telling cousins it was just more practical at their age, but families know, they always know. Aunt Sarah stopped bringing her famous casserole to potlucks. Uncle Jim's poker nights somehow never had room for one more. The invitations to grandkid birthday parties arrived later and later, if at all, not with malice just, the slow, natural drift of respect ebbing away. I was sorting through old mail left in a kitchen drawer when my phone lit up with a voicemail notification. Unknown number. Hi, I'm calling about the rental property on Oak Street? A young woman's voice, bright but tentative. I saw the listing online. My daughter just got accepted to the community college nearby, and we're looking for... She paused, took a breath. Well, we're looking for a fresh start. If we could schedule a viewing? I stood in the middle of the kitchen, his kitchen. My kitchen and felt the last pieces click into place. The house that was supposed to shame me would shelter someone else's dreams now. The realtor's sign in the front yard caught the late afternoon sun. My name clear and professional at the bottom. No hiding, no diminishing. Just facts in black and white. Property managed by Dana Kellerman. Inside, dust motes kept dancing through sunbeams, but the air felt lighter somehow. Tomorrow, I'd have the windows washed, the carpets cleaned, the counters polished. But for now, I just stood there, letting the quiet settle around me like a comfortable blanket. My phone buzzed again, probably the property manager with paperwork. But that could wait. I wanted to savor this moment, here in the house that was meant to mock me. Here in the rooms where he'd tried to make me smaller. Here, where I finally stood tall. My phone buzzed with a new voicemail while I was measuring the living room windows. The young woman's voice was clear, professional. Hi, I saw your rental listing. My name's Sarah Martinez. My family's looking to move closer to State College, where I'll be starting this fall. My dad's a veteran, and we'd love to see the property if possible. Something in her tone made me call back immediately. We set up a viewing for that afternoon. I spent the next few hours wiping down surfaces and opening windows, letting fresh air chase away the lingering heaviness. The Martinez family arrived right on time. Sarah, bright-eyed and earnest in her college sweatshirt. Her mother, Elena, whose handshake was warm and firm. And James, her father, who stood straight despite the slight favor he gave his left leg. The pride in how they carried themselves reminded me of something I'd lost sight of lately. The kitchen's original, I explained, but everything works. Elena ran her hand along the countertop I'd just cleaned. It's got good bones. Reminds me of my grandmother's house. James studied the water heater, the electrical panel, asked smart questions about maintenance. Sarah lingered in what would have been my old bedroom, already planning where her desk would go. I'll be commuting, she explained. Living at home saves money for books and labs. I'm pre-med. My throat tightened unexpectedly. This room gets great morning light for studying. Over coffee at the kitchen table, the same spot where Richard had held forth about my financial cluelessness, they shared their story. James had served 15 years before an IED changed everything. Elena had worked double shifts while he recovered. Sarah had grown up watching her parents rebuild their world with quiet determination. We've been saving, James said, his coffee untouched. But with college costs. I thought about my own silent years of saving, of proving myself to someone who refused to see. The listed rent, I heard myself say, we can adjust that. Elena started to protest, but I held up my hand. I have one condition. I met each of their eyes. Treat this place with pride. Make it yours. Deal? The paperwork went quickly. By the time Eli came by to help with the final details, the Martinez family had already started measuring for curtains. I watched through the window as Sarah and Elena discussed paint colors for her room, while James checked the gutters with the focus of a man who knew the value of maintenance. You did good here, Eli said, his voice gentle. He'd known me since I was Sarah's age, had watched me navigate Richard's shadows. From his briefcase, he pulled out a small wrapped package, a housewarming gift for all of us. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a brass plaque. The engraving caught the afternoon light. Clueless house paid in full. My laugh surprised might felt clean, unburdened. For the front gate, Eli suggested, where everyone can see it. I traced the letters with my finger. Through the window, I could see Sarah helping her father check the roofline, pointing out something that made them both smile. Elena was already scrubbing windows, refusing to wait for moving day to begin making this place shine. You know what, Eli? I picked up the plaque. I think I know exactly where this belongs. We walked out to the gate together, the weight of the brass solid in my hands. Behind us, I could hear the Martinez's quiet laughter drifting through the open windows, the sound of a home coming back to life. I waited until dusk to install the plaque. The Martinez family had left for the day, promising to return tomorrow with paint samples. The street was quiet except for distant lawnmowers and kids being called in for dinner. Just me and my father's old drill that I'd grabbed from the garage before he moved out. The brass felt heavier than it should have as I lined it up on the gatepost. Funny how such a small thing could carry so much weight. The late summer air hung thick with humidity, making my hands slip slightly on the drill's grip. I'd watched Richard use this same tool hundreds of times, always with a running commentary about proper technique and why women should learn basic maintenance. Hold it straight, his voice echoed in my head. You'll strip the screws if you don't keep it level. My hands were steady as I marked the mounting points. The bit caught the wood with a clean bite, sending tiny spirals of sawdust into the evening air. The scent triggered a flash of memory weekends in his workshop, being told to watch and learn, but never quite measuring up to his standards. The first screw went in clean, then the second. The plaque settled perfectly level against the post straighter than Richard would have managed, if I'm being honest. I ran my fingers over the engraving, feeling each letter of Clueless house beneath my skin. The irony wasn't lost on me, his insult transformed into a badge of victory. A car drove by, headlights sweeping across the gate. I stepped back, studying my handiwork in the fading light. No fanfare, no audience. Just the solid truth of brass against wood, declaring what I'd known all along but had never needed to prove until he forced my hand. Back inside, I wiped down the drill and set it on the kitchen counter. My laptop screen glowed with a new email notification. Richard's name made my stomach clench, but only for a moment. The subject line was blank. I opened it, half expecting another rant about family loyalty or how I'd embarrassed him. Instead, just 2 words stared back at me. You win. My finger hovered over the reply button. A dozen responses flashed through my mind, some bitter, some triumphant, some trying to explain what he'd never understood. In the end, I just clicked delete. Some victories don't need words. From the street, I could see warm light spilling from the windows I now owned, in a house that would soon welcome a family who understood the real meaning of pride. The porch light cast a soft glow on the fresh welcome mat Elena had already dropped off. With a quiet click, I turned it off. Standing there in the growing dark, watching the house glow from within, I felt the last weight lift from my chest. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped playing his game. The brass plaque caught a glint of streetlight, winking like a shared secret between old friends. Tomorrow, the Martinez family would begin moving in. They'd pass that plaque every day, never knowing its history. To them, it would just be an odd name for a lovely home. But to me, it would always be the period at the end of a very long sentence one that had taken 40 years to write. I gave the house one last look before heading to my car. The drill sat in the passenger seat, a silent companion for the drive home. Some tools, I'd learned, work just as well for building new stories as they do for dismantling old ones. I rented the house to the Martinez family at 20% below market. Something about Sarah's determination, about James's quiet dignity, it felt right. When Elena hugged me after signing the lease, I had to turn away to hide the catch in my throat. That afternoon, I pulled into the driveway with Eli's gift box on the passenger seat. The brass plaque caught the sun through the wrapping paper. I sat there for a moment, remembering all those Sunday dinners when Richard would hold court about real success, about how renters were just throwing money away. The weight of the drill in my hand felt good, solid, purposeful. I'd picked it up that morning, along with the right-sized bits and anchors. Some things you need to do yourself. The gate's wrought iron was cool under my fingers as I held the level against it. The bubble shifted lazily, then settled. Perfect spot, right at eye level. The drill's whine cut through the quiet street, and fine metal shavings sprinkled the concrete below. You know that moment when you're doing something completely ordinary, but it feels bigger than itself? That's what it was like, installing those 4 small screws. Each one went in straight and true, just like my father had taught me back when I was still his good girl. The brass caught the late afternoon light. Clueless, house paid in full. Clean, simple letters, no flourishes needed. I ran my thumb over them, feeling each ridge and valley. A car drove by, then another. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked what I was doing. The world just kept turning while I stood there, drill hanging at my side, looking at those words that said everything without saying too much. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Email notification. Richard's name made my finger hesitate over the screen, but I opened it anyway. You win. 2 words. No explanation needed, no excuse offered, just surrender, plain and simple. I deleted it without replying. Some conversations are better left in silence. The porch light had clicked on automatically one of those small smart home features I'd added last week. I walked over and turned it off manually. Standing back by my car, I watched the house settle into dusk. Warm light spilled from the kitchen window where the Martinez family would soon gather for dinner. The brass plaque caught the last rays of sun, then faded to a quiet gleam. My father had always said I didn't understand the value of property. He was right in a way. I never saw it as just bricks and mortar, just dollars and cents. I saw it as something else, something you earn, not by shouting, but by proving. Something you measure not in square feet, but in the space it creates for others to grow. The evening air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from down the street. Somewhere, a screen door slapped shut. Normal sounds, normal night. But standing there, watching the house that was now mine, everything felt different. Not because I'd won, not because he'd lost. Because finally, after all these years, the silence spoke louder than his words ever had. I touched the plaque one last time to check if it was secure, but to feel its permanence. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving the house to write its own new story with the family who would fill it with fresh dreams. Some victories don't need an audience. Some moments are perfect just as they are quiet, complete, and paid in full. I sat in my home office that evening, laptop open to the banking portal. The numbers stared back at me, clean and absolute. Loan balance, 0, transfer complete. No pending transactions. You ever notice how some memories change when you look at them through different eyes? I closed my eyes and let myself drift back to that BBQ. The smell of charred meat and lighter fluid. The sticky heat that had us all seeking shade. The way the ice clinked in plastic cups as everyone juggled paper plates and conversation. But this time, something was different. The scene played out like a movie I'd watched too many times, only now I could see the subtext clear as day. Richard, standing there with his spatula like some backyard king, desperately trying to maintain his image. The way his laugh had gotten louder when someone mentioned my success. The slight tremor in his hand as he'd flipped those burgers not from age, but from knowing his own house of cards was about to collapse. "Still renting at 40, he'd said. Guess I didn't raise her right." The words didn't sting anymore, they just echoed, hollow and obvious, a drowning man trying to push someone else under to stay afloat. My phone buzzed, email from Eli. Subject line, final documentation. I opened the attachment, the deed transfer receipt, stamped and certified. His message was brief. "Well done. Your uncle would have been proud." The cursor blinked on my screen, steady as a heartbeat. I opened my financial tracking spreadsheet, the one I'd been maintaining for the past decade. Column after column of careful planning, silent accumulation. The latest entry, house purchase complete. Remember how your teachers always said to show your work? This was mine. Every calculation, every investment, every quiet no to unnecessary spendingit had all led here. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove to myself that I understood exactly what I was doing. The setting sun painted my office wall in shades of amber. I thought about Richard in his trailer, probably sitting in his recliner, telling himself stories about how it had all gone wrong. But I didn't need those stories anymore. Didn't need his version of events, his approval, his understanding. My laptop screen dimmed to save power. In that semi-darkness, I caught my reflection, just a outline really, but I saw something I'd missed before. The straight spine, the lifted chin. The posture of someone who finally knows their own worth. The BBQ memory flickered one last time. The laughter, the judgment, the moment I'd walked away, hiding in the guest room. But now I could see what really happened that day. It wasn't my humiliation, it was his last grasp at control, and in trying to diminish me, he'd only revealed his own smallness. I pulled up the property records one more time, not because I needed to check, but because I wanted to see it again. My name, my house, my choice. The words I'd been holding back for 40 years rose up like a tide. They weren't angry, weren't bitter. They were just true. "I know exactly who I am," I whispered to the quiet room. The words hung there, simple and clean as fresh ink on paper. No one else heard them. No one else needed to. I thought about Sarah Martinez, probably unpacking boxes in her new bedroom right now, planning her college future. About James and Elena, making that house their own, filling it with new memories. About that brass plaque, catching tomorrow's sunrise. My phone lit up again, another email from Eli, just a single line this time. "Your documentation is complete. File closed." I touched the screen of my laptop where the deed transfer glowed. 40 years of waiting for validation had ended, not with a bang or a whimper, but with the quiet certainty of numbers balanced and accounts settled. The BBQ memory made one last attempt to surface, but this time I let it fade. Some stories don't need to be replayed anymore. Some victories are best measured in silence. I looked at my reflection again in the darkened screen. "I know exactly who I am," I repeated, tasting the truth of it. The words felt like home. I drove past the old house one crisp October morning, 6 months after everything changed. Wasn't planning to, just found myself taking the long way home from my weekly coffee run. You know how muscle memory works? 20 years of Sunday dinners will do that to your steering wheel. The maple trees lining the street were showing off their fall colors, just like they always did. Made me think of all those autumn afternoons spent raking leaves with Dad, back when his approval meant everything. Back when I thought working harder, staying quieter would somehow earn what should have been given freely. The new tenants had transformed the place. Sarah, the college-bound daughter, had hung cascading ferns from the porch hooks, the same hooks that used to hold Mom's sad plastic flowers. Mike, her dad, kept the lawn Marine Corps pristine. Even from my slow roll-by, I could see the fresh mulch and trimmed hedges. Their flag caught the morning breeze, snapping like gentle applause. My brass plaque still marked the gate, catching sunlight like a wink. Clueless house paid in full. The words didn't sting anymore. Funny how time does that, isn't it? Takes the venom out of old wounds and leaves you with something closer to wisdom. I thought about stopping, maybe saying hello. Sarah would be home from her first semester soon. Mike had texted last week about some minor plumbing issue they'd already fixed. Good tenants, good people. They'd made the house their own, erasing the heavy air of Dad's disappointment with simple, honest living. But I kept driving. You see, I didn't need to pull into that driveway anymore, didn't need to walk those steps or touch that door or prove anything to anyone. The victory wasn't in owning the house, it was in finally owning my worth. Last I heard, Dad was still in that trailer park 3 towns over. Mom visits him sometimes, brings casseroles and carefully edited family news. She called me last month, voice soft with something between guilt and pride. "He asks about you," she said. I just hummed. Some conversations don't need words. The autumn sun warmed my face through the windshield as I turned onto the main road. My phone buzzed, probably another client consultation request. My little blog had grown into a 7-figure consulting firm. Not that I ever told Dad. Some successes speak for themselves. I thought about that BBQ, about his booming laugh when he called me financially clueless. The memory sat differently now, like an old photo that's lost its power to hurt. I'd spent so many years trying to decode his disappointment, measuring myself against his narrow yardstick of success. The dashboard clock hit 9:00 a.m. Time for my first meeting. I had a team to lead, clients to advise, a life built on my own terms. No applause needed, no validation required. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing exactly who I was and what I'd earned. My phone lit up again, this time with Eli's name. He still checked in, my retired CPA guardian angel. Probably wanted to grab lunch, share more stories about my uncle, remind me that family isn't always about blood. The trees thinned out as I left the old neighborhood behind. In my rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of the house. The morning light hit it just right, making the windows gleam like newly opened eyes. Sarah had planted mums along the walkway splashes of copper and gold that Dad would have called frivolous. They looked perfect. I didn't wave goodbye. Didn't need that gesture either. Some chapters close themselves, quietly and completely, like a well-balanced ledger. The numbers tell the story. The rest is just details. American flag caught the breeze, snapping proudly against its pole. And there, right where I'd mounted it myself, my brass plaque caught the late afternoon sun. Clueless house paid in full. The words still made my chest tighten, but not from anger anymore. More like the satisfied ache after a long-delayed exhale. I eased my car to a stop across the street, just watching. Mike and his wife Jenny were setting up folding tables on the lawn. Looked like they were hosting some kind of gathering maybe for Sarah's scholarship announcement. She'd gotten into her first choice school last week. Jenny had texted me a photo of the acceptance letter, along with a thank you note that made me cry in my office. The scent of charcoal drifted over. Another BBQ, but this one felt different. Clean. No undercurrents, no forced laughter, no desperate need to prove anything. Just good people sharing good news. From my quiet spot beneath the oak trees, I watched Sarah help her mom arrange a stack of paper plates while Mike tended the grill. He handled it with the same precise care he gave everything else. Methodical, respectful, present. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Richard's still at the trailer, won't answer calls." I didn't reply. What was there to say? He'd chosen his ending alone in that metal box, 3 towns over, pride his only company. The family gossip had died down, but everyone knew. The lies about gambling debts, the secret refinancing, the foreclosure he'd nearly walked us all into. His reputation hadn't just cracked, it had shattered under the weight of its own deception. The sunset painted everything gold. Sarah waved to someone walking up the drive, probably one of her friends. The the brass plaque caught a ray of light and winked at me, like we shared a private joke. In a way, we did. Nobody but Eli and I knew its real meaning. To everyone else, it was just an odd name choice. To me, it was the period at the end of a very long sentence. I thought about that birthday BBQ, how Dad's words had burned worse than any grill smoke. Financially clueless, he'd said, laughing for his audience. Now he lived on Social Security in a rented lot, while I owned his house free and clear. The irony should have tasted sweet. Instead, it just felt finished, complete. Mike spotted me and raised his spatula in greeting. I waved back but didn't get out. This was their moment, their home now. I'd given them a fair rent and good bones. They'd filled it with something better than revenge, they'd given it purpose. The house stood straighter these days, like it too had been freed from old weights. Through my open window, I heard Sarah laugh at something Jenny said. The sound carried no edge, no agenda, just joy, pure and simple. Behind them, my plaque caught one last ray of sunset, the engraved letters sharp and sure. I'd had it made not to gloat, but to remind myself, true worth doesn't need a spotlight. I shifted into drive, ready to leave them to their celebration. Dad's voice no longer echoed in these walls. His shadows had been swept out with the old furniture, replaced by a family who understood what mattered. They'd never know how their happiness had completed my victory, not through force or volume, but through quiet, dignified living. As I pulled away, I glanced one last time at the house in my rearview mirror. The gathering was in full swing now, people clustering around Mike's grill, kids playing tag on the lawn. No one was keeping score. No one was measuring worth. They were just being. I smiled, remembering what Eli had said when we finished the paperwork. Respect is earned in silence, not shouted over a grill. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.